Welcome to the Financial Advisor Success Podcast, where you go behind the scenes with financial planner, speaker, and consultant Michael Kitces to hear stories of how leading financial advisors navigated the inevitable challenges that arise on the path to success, and get insight from leading industry consultants about how to break through to the next level in your advisory business. And now here's your host, Michael Kitces.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the 445th episode of the Financial Advisor Success Podcast. My guest on today's podcast is James Canole. James is the founder of Root Financial, an RIA based in Encinitas, California, that oversees $1.3 billion in assets under management for 630 client households. What's unique about James, though, is how his firm has experienced massive growth, expecting to grow its revenue from $4.6 million to more than $10 million in 2025 alone, thanks in part by attracting clients who have engaged with his educational YouTube videos. In this episode, we talk in depth about how James found that transitioning from audio and video content covering general personal finance topics to material specifically for his ideal target clients, pre-retirees and retirees with at least $2 million in investable assets, initially led to fewer viewers, but ultimately to more interested prospects. Why James views consistency, in his case posting a new YouTube video weekly, and depth of content to differentiate his videos from others covering more surface-level material, as keys to his success attracting clients through this medium, and how James has created a separate YouTube channel that gives prospective clients and potential employees a behind-the-scenes look at how Root operates and the people behind it, giving these groups a better idea of what they could expect if they work with the firm. We also talk about how James, once his firm started to receive a strong flow of leads, increased the friction involved for prospects to schedule an introductory meeting by requiring them to fill out a short form on their financial situation and disclosing the firm's fees and asset minimums, leading to a higher percentage of meetings with good fit prospects, how James's firm transitioned from a 3-meeting sales process to what it calls a 1-meeting close, enabled in part by prospects already being familiar with the firm and how it operates based on their experience with its YouTube videos, and how James established a standardized system of 5 meeting types in order: discovery, income, investments, retirement, and tax projections and security, to efficiently onboard new clients as the firm grows. And be certain to listen to the end, where James shares how instituting a $2 million asset minimum for clients allows the firm to reinvest more aggressively, particularly into new staff to handle its rapid client growth, and position itself to potentially create a service for less wealthy clients down the line, how James's firm standardized advisor training into its Root University program, which leverages tech tools like Monday.com and Loom to provide a consistent and scalable training experience, and how James is working to establish a strong company culture in a remote working environment, including by holding annual company retreats and smaller in-person gatherings among members of individual teams. And so with that introduction, I hope you enjoy this episode of the Financial Advisor Success Podcast with James Canole. Welcome, James Canole, to the Financial Advisor Success Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
I'm really excited to have you on today and to just get to talk about, as I would frame it, like real organic growth in an industry where a lot of firms are really struggling with organic growth. And in particular, as we'll dive in soon, like the ways that you have done this through not only social media and YouTube and video in particular. Because I still think back to like 10 to 15 years ago when social media first hit the scene, as like LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter really all started going mainstream. And there was this discussion of like, all traditional marketing is dead. The future is social media. We'll all find our advisors online in this environment. And it really largely has not played out. Like we do a lot of research on this from the Kitces research end. At the end of the day, we still find about 2/3 of clients meet their advisors through a referral, either from a client or a center of influence or some other trusted source. And almost 2/3 of the remainder meet their advisor because they actually meet them in person at like a seminar or a networking meeting or something similar. And a remarkably small percentage of clients are actually finding their advisor through any kind of social media channel. But I feel like some of it does depend on the nature of the medium. And I've certainly lived this, building a lot of business on a lot of social media channels as well, that, like the written social media stuff, the like, Twitter and the like is a little bit different than the visual elements of Instagram or Facebook, is a little bit different than audio when you're actually doing a podcast and you're in someone's ear, is different than video when like they can really kind of see how you talk and communicate and interact because you're in a full frame video. Um, and that it seems like the deepest connections come from video, and the hardest way to make a connection comes from video because you're either good or someone clicks on in relatively few seconds because attention spans for video are pretty short unless it's really good. And I know you have like found a formula that seems to work and have had some truly extraordinary growth that I will get into soon. Uh, but to start, like, I'm just excited to talk about these different growth channels, and I guess really just hearing your perspective of is it really different when we start thinking about marketing through video versus all of the other social media like channels and mediums?
Happy to explore all that. My answer is I think so, but I also have really only explored one or two of these, so I can't speak to all of them. But what I can speak to, happy to share everything.
So we'll get more into the actual marketing channels in a moment, but I think as a starting point, just so we can set context for everyone, tell us about the advisory firm itself as it exists today, and then we'll start diving in a little bit deeper into how growth has worked for you.
So the firm name is Root Financial. Root started at the very end of 2017, so we're about 7.5 years old. We are growing almost exclusively through YouTube, podcast, other social stuff, online media. And today the team size is 46 team members, and we're serving about 630 clients, and our assets today are 1.3 billion.
Okay, and can I ask what revenue is relative to that?
Revenue for this year will probably be somewhere in the realm of 10 to 12 million.
Okay,
Last year was 4.6, 4.7.
that's a lot of growth from last year. So thus the conversation about growth rates we'll get into more in a moment. Uh, and so typical clientele, I mean, I can do the napkin math, 1.3 billion, 600 something clients, you get an average of roughly $2 million. Uh, but I guess like, I don't know if that's really representative or how you would describe target clientele for the firm.
Yeah, the median client's probably 60 years old with somewhere between $3.5 million or so in their portfolio. Obviously, some with a lot more. Right now, our investment minimum is $2 million, not from the standpoint of we're trying to grow that thing and increase that and become more and more exclusive. Just that's probably the easiest way to control for inbound lead flow. So that's kind of our easy lever to pull. If things are getting too much, we just can't service everyone that's coming in, we can play with that number a bit. But today, the 2 million AUM threshold is the minimum, and so you get a median client somewhere in the $3 to $3.5 million range. Someone approaching retirement.
So I think that's striking just how you framed it. So minimums aren't at 2 million for you because I need to be at 2 million in order to generate enough revenue to be profitable relative to the services I'm providing for clients. It sounds like a part of a $2 million minimum for you is because we're already growing so fast. If we cut it down to 1 million and we got more new clients, we actually would have a problem handling them.
Yeah, and we didn't start that way. When I started, it was exactly what you said. If someone's got $100,000 rollover, 200,000, that's awesome. That's $1,000 a year of revenue. That's $2,000 a year of revenue. So
Yeah.
that is exactly. I think that's how probably most people started, myself included. And then once it got to this point of okay, now we have to make some decisions of we just cannot serve everyone, but how do we reconcile that with the fact that we do have this desire to be more than just a a profitable financial services firm, but we do have this desire to have a true impact upon the clients that we can serve and the number of clients that we can serve. You then have to start prioritizing making those decisions of how do you do this in the most effective way. And this was the way that seemed to be the clearest path to where we ultimately want to go. But it didn't start. I didn't start Root saying, "Okay, I'm going to have this minimum." I would not be in business. I would have just not had enough clients to do that. So it was only once we got to this point of having an abundance of prospective clients coming in that it was obviously much easier to make that decision at that point because there were enough people above that threshold to make it work.
I guess that's a good like context and point to make that you make one set of decisions when clients, prospects, opportunities are scarce, right? And we're just trying to get what we can to survive. When your problem is prospects aren't scarce, we actually have a really good marketing machine that's working and generating a healthy, steady flow. Again, like relative to most firms, nice problem to have, right, in air quotes, but it's still a real problem if you, especially in a service business, if you take on too many people too quickly that you can't serve well, you can actually blow up your business quite quickly. So when your problem really is, I'm actually getting a lot more opportunity flow than I have capacity to serve, the decisions start to change. Like just the decision framework, I guess, starts to change. So with that as some context and lead in, right? To me, just sort of the eye popping thing that kind of slipped in there was, we project revenue at 10 to 12 million this year. It was 4.6 last year. That's a whole lot of growth. So tell us about the growth. So where does all of this new business flow opportunity come from for you?
Primarily YouTube and almost entirely YouTube and podcast. And I could tell that story if that'd be helpful, just the genesis of that. But
Yeah,
it
please.
is, it's, I would, um, start 2019. I think it was 2019. I started the first podcast. So myself and Scott Frank, who's an advisor that has an office about 5 blocks from me, we got together one day and said, "Hey, everyone's doing a podcast. Why don't we do a podcast?" And we just did a joint podcast. And it got traction. It picked up some steam. We were getting viewers, downloads, all the fun metrics. It's like, oh, cool, people are actually listening. This is fun. But it wasn't necessarily translating into a ton of inbound demand or leads. But I could tell that there was something behind the whole. People listen to quality content if you put the time and effort into creating quality content. And that then transformed into 2020 hit, COVID hit, shutdowns went into effect. And it was, I would really wish I had a similar platform, but to reach more of the target market that I personally am working with, which is not dissimilar from most other advisors, which is people entering and in retirement. And this podcast that Scott and I were doing, it was called Real Personal Finance. It was great, but it was very broad. We would answer questions from listeners, everyone from, I'm 22 years old, I'm in the military, what should I do with my TSP? We'd address that versus I'm 68 years old and I'm retired, and how do I think about my RMDs and how to approach that? So it was helpful to people. It was good information, but it wasn't making it super clear of here's who I serve at Root, or here's who Scott serves, or here's who, whatever the case might be. And so in 2020, I launched Ready for Retirement, which was a different podcast specifically targeted towards people approaching retirement, as the name suggests. And so that was something where it didn't do as large of numbers. I don't know what the numbers exactly were, but I remember my podcast with Scott was doing better in terms of downloads.
Do you remember any numbers? I mean, just approximately. Like, I don't know what the scale of good or not good was for you at the time.
Today it's 30 something thousand downloads a month on the Ready for Retirement podcast. At the time, it was maybe 1,000. It was not as much. It was obviously much lower. This was in the initial days. But what I remember thinking was, wow, this is a lot less in terms of downloads. Real Personal Finance might have been 2,000 or 3,000. I could be way off. This is
okay.
5-6
Sure.
years ago
Yeah,
now.
we're just neighborhood.
Yeah.
I get it. Okay.
Somewhere in that neighborhood, but the Ready for Retirement podcast started generating leads. And so it was, okay, there's this sense that it's not just having helpful content, but ideally targeted content to where you are holding yourself out as this is who I work with, and this is a specific expertise that I have. And so that started getting some traction, and that was working. And then 2021, I want to say it was, I forget the exact time frame, but I was doing the podcast, and one of my friends, who's actually now working at Root, he's our head of brand culture, his name's Josh, he was working as a creative director at GoPro at the time. And he said, you need to just take the podcast stuff that you're doing and just record yourself doing it and post it on YouTube. People are finding a lot more of their content on YouTube than podcasts right now. And so I did that. I did 5 episodes on YouTube. And by episodes, I just mean literally stuck my iPhone in front of me and recorded what I was doing in the podcast and then uploaded that to YouTube. And nothing happened. It was 2 views, 3 views, 4 views. But what was tough about it was I was doing all the editing. I just set everything up really poorly in terms of I'm recording into GarageBand, but I'm recording audio into GarageBand, I'm recording video into my iPhone, I'm trying to sync them, I'm trying to edit them. It would literally take me an entire day to edit a 25-minute YouTube video that was getting 3 views or 4 views. And so
That doesn't feel good. Yep.
it was just a waste of time. So I said, okay, thanks for the idea, Josh, but this is kind of dumb. I'm not going to do this anymore. So I stopped doing that. I did 5 episodes and then stopped, and nothing came of it for probably 6, 7, 8 months. And I remember one day, I literally remember people getting emails. So-and-so commented on your YouTube video. I don't even remember what the YouTube video was. I was like, maybe this was one of my announcement videos that, hey, I'm starting Root Financial, and I threw it on YouTube or something. But they kept coming in. And it's, oh, so-and-so subscribed to your YouTube video. So-and-so commented on your YouTube video. And it wasn't crazy numbers, but one of those videos that I had uploaded 8 months ago, all of a sudden was getting a few hundred views, and then 1,000 views, and then 3,000 views. And it showed me that there's something really unique about YouTube, and that YouTube is almost like this Sherpa with your message of how can we help guide it to the people that need it most or need to hear it most. And that clicked that, okay, maybe this is something that I should invest in. So from the end of 2021, committed to doing at least one show on YouTube in addition to the podcast. And that's really when things started to pick up, and it's just been a progression since then.
So the podcast, so I guess this was Ready for Retirement podcast, which then morphed into the YouTube channel. What, I guess, even back to the original original podcast, what was the format? I mean, are you like bringing on guests, interviewing guests? Is this just kind of monologue style? Like I just turn on the mic and I
just monologue style,
talk and share my expertise. So today we're going to talk about such and such, and I'm going to teach you about it.
It was that. It was a monologue. The one with Scott was obviously the two of us. It was a dialogue, which was much easier. Right. But the Ready for Retirement was just me talking. I brought in maybe 2 guests over the course of time, but it was very rare.
Okay. And I think you said it was like 25 minutes was the length that you were doing, at least back then, because that's what you tried to make into a video and GarageBand plus video editing. So like, what were you talking about? I mean, what were you covering for 25 minutes at a time?
Anything and everything retirement related. It got to the point where once enough people start listening, they start submitting questions, and then you could take that question and obviously preface it as this is not advice, but you could start saying, here's how I would think about this. Or if someone's asking questions about conversions, which is obviously a big topic for retirees. What are the other things that you need to be mindful of? How does that tie into your withdrawal strategy? How does that tie into what you should do with your investments? How does that tie into anything and everything? Being aware of IRMA surcharges. Should you prioritize Roth conversions or tax gain harvesting? What about if you're doing charitable? So it was probably the best thing it did for me was it actually really sharpened my thinking as an advisor. And then if Michael's asking me a question and Michael's my client, I know you and I can give you a response that's directly to you and I understand the context. But when you're trying to answer a question or when you're trying to explain a topic and have to think of it more through like a decision tree or first principles of what is the most important thing to start with this question, and then what, and then what, and then what, and how do you explain that in a way that can be helpful to people regardless of their situation, it really does sharpen your thinking as an advisor and makes you a better advisor. And so that was actually one of the best things I would say up front is how effective it makes you as the actual person providing advice to clients. But it would be investment stuff. It would be withdrawal stuff. It would be just general retirement. Hey, here's my situation. Can I retire? And again, you can't give specific advice, but you could generally walk through, here's your Social Security income floor. What might you be able to create with investments that you have? What other things might you want to be thinking about? So it was a whole bunch of different things.
Interesting. And very much in a I'm answering questions format. I mean, it sounds like that's kind of a guiding theme.
Yeah, not every episode. It was just easier. Sometimes you get whatever the equivalent of writer's block is. What do I record today?
Right.
Well, if there's a question, I can just pull that up and answer that.
Yeah, I've had the same thing over the years. I used to get questions like, how do we keep putting out like content on Nerd's Eye View and not run out of things to write about? I'm like, well, I just go to a lot of conferences. I talk to a lot of advisors. They ask questions, and if I hear it several times, then I write an article. And like, people don't run out of questions to ask, so I don't run out of things to create content on.
Yeah, same principle.
So Uh, so I want to move. Well, so I'm going to ask more questions about video in the moment, but I want to understand a little bit more. Like, I was struck by your comment. You went from the Real Personal Finance podcast with Scott to Ready for Retirement that you were doing on your own. You were getting like half the downloads, but Ready for Retirement was actually generating leads. And I'm always fascinated by, just there's a lot of the time we spend a lot of effort trying to make like the main number bigger, right? The downloads, the followers, the subscribers, like whatever it is, depending on what channel you're on. And sometimes the thing that generates the actual business results isn't necessarily what gets the biggest top line numbers. Like the thing that gets the best business results, the thing that gets the best business results. So I'm curious, at least as you like reflect and look back, what was different about what you were doing or how you were executing Ready for Retirement, that Ready for Retirement with half the listenership was getting more actual client opportunities?
Part of it, packaging is not the right word, but I forget who said this. But like if you've got an ant problem and you walk into the store and it says bug spray on one container and the other one says ant spray, even if they're the exact same thing, you're going to buy the ant spray because it seems more targeted towards the exact problem that you have. And so even though I would be talking about similar things on certain episodes with Scott, it was the generic bug spray. It wasn't that this is the ant spray that's specific to your problem. So I think that was that's probably the biggest thing. It was that every single episode was geared directly towards a problem or a challenge that someone in that phase of life would be facing. So I think it's just that of if I'm listening to a podcast and it's, oh, that's an interesting topic, that's a lot different than I'm listening to a podcast and every single one of these topics is applicable to me. Um, I'm more apt to reach out to the person that talks to me every time as opposed to the person that knows about me and is part of their audience, but I'm not their single audience.
And were you actually inviting people to reach out? I mean, was there a
Yeah, I think so.
call to action to prompt people? What did you cue them up to do? I mean, how did you try to get them to cross the the audio to in person divide, or the listener to prospect meeting divide?
If I remember correctly, it was just a standard outro at the end of every episode, which was something along the lines of, if you need help with your retirement, reach out to us at www.rootfinancial.com. Hopefully said a little bit better than that. I don't remember, but it was just that. It was just a standard outro that we put at the end of every episode before the disclaimer, and that was it.
Okay. And it started to make some people reach out.
Yeah, it started to make some people reach out. YouTube really started making some people reach out. But I think the thing, like, the reach out is only kind of step one. I think that I thought if I could just get leads, that's problem solved. Everything's good. And like, for example, when YouTube really started going off, I remember I was on a little mini vacation with my wife. It was a 3-day weekend. We were out in Colorado, and I had blocked off. I didn't block off. I had very few meetings scheduled for the following week when we returned because I just wanted to be able to get back and catch up on some stuff that I had been working on. So this was late 2021, a little bit after maybe 2 months, 3 months after I started really committing to weekly YouTube stuff. I wasn't checking my phone a whole lot because we're out, we're hiking, we're doing all this stuff. And I remember coming back to our hotel room and my inbox had just blown up. And I had it was like 25 lead calls that had been booked the following week. And I looked at this and
that's a lot of leads.
It was. And so at the time I was like, okay, problem solved. I'm the next whatever, solved. Whatever problems exist in growth, they've all just been handled. Yep. And I feel pretty good. And my work here is done.
Yes, I've solved the magic growth problem. I now have lead flow.
Exactly. And then I took all those lead calls, and I'm not exaggerating. I think 24 of the 25 were just like, hey, we really like your stuff. Can we pay you an hourly fee to take a look at what we're doing and give us some advice? Which is fine if that's your business model, but that is not we're AUM, and that's the only way that we work. And so this was not the outcome that I was looking for that I thought it was. It was not, oh, great, I'm going to have 25 clients that are going to work with me on an ongoing basis. And so it's almost it was the first of many helpful lessons of what seemed like total excitement ended up being I won't say a total bust, but it felt like a total bust. It felt like a total letdown of, oh, geez, this maybe YouTube is great, but it's just not attracting the right people. And so what it led us to do is say, how can we be very, very clear about setting the right expectations and screening for the types of clients that we do want to be able to serve. So it magnified the real problem. So the first problem is leads. How do you get them? Okay, that problem is solved. Then that magnified the next problem or the next opportunity, which is how do we set expectations? How do we create the right screens so that people are aware of how we charge, of how we work, of what type of people we work with? So then we did a lot of work on that, of setting the expectations. And then we did start getting the right leads in the door. Then I became the next problem of, okay, all the right leads are coming in the door, but I'm taking all the calls and I'm the one kind of now saying, you're going to work with so-and-so, or you're going to work with so-and-so, or you're going to work with me, whatever the case might be. So I was becoming the bottleneck. And so we now need to say, okay, how do we create a routing system that connects our leads, our prospects to the right advisors? So we figured out that problem. And then all of a sudden it's, okay, the leads are going to the right advisors, but our sales process isn't totally standardized. How much time are advisors spending chasing down prospects, looking for an answer, asking for statements, following up, checking in? And there's just this context switching. They're doing client work to doing prospecting work to doing trying to close clients. It just wasn't great for advisors who then weren't able to spend their time advising. So we fixed that. We introduced what we called the one meeting close process, where everything would flow through one advisor. He would do that explore meeting, close the client on that call or not. And once the client was closed, then essentially pair them with the advisor we felt would be the best fit to do that. And so that was fixed. But then it's like, okay, well, how do we have a standardized, consistent experience for each of these clients? So that led to us, and I can slow down any time if you want to dive into this, Michael, but we created what we call Sequoia system. So it's not just, cool, a great lead comes in and they're going to be connected with an advisor. If we have 5 advisors or 10 advisors or 20 advisors or whatever it is, and every single experience is different, that's not good. That's not how you build a sustainable, scalable organization. That's just essentially a whole bunch of one-off advisors under the same roof, but there's no consistency here. That's not a true business, or at least not the way we want to build it. So we create our Sequoia system, which is, okay, what is the exact onboarding flow? Someone goes from the explore meeting with a sales team to the kickoff meeting, to the income meeting, to the investment meeting, to the tax meeting, to the security meeting. How do we train for each of those? How do we prep for each of those? How do we follow up for each of those? How do we run each of those? How do we create resources and agendas and materials for each of those? So we created that and said, okay, well, how do we train on this? Well, we created Root University. So how do we provide resources? How do we provide just the ability for advisors to be able to run these? Because I think our advisors are just, maybe everyone says this, but just the most insanely talented people I know. But how do we create these standardized templates and processes to be able to create a really unique client experience? And then you get all that stuff. And it's okay, well, now how do we make sure advisors and team members want to stay here for the rest of their careers? Which is, how do you develop career paths? How do you develop compensation standards? How do you develop culture? So it's almost like there's a waterfall of problems or opportunities, depending on how you want to look at it. And YouTube just kind of became the top of the waterfall of, I felt like, okay, this solved everything. But really from the top, that's like we have, I think, pretty great growth numbers. But to me, that's not even close to what's most impressive about, like, that pales in comparison to what I believe is the true most impressive thing about Root, which is the service that clients are getting, the advisors that we have, the way in which we deliver it. Like, that's actually the cool part to me and the exciting part to me. The YouTube stuff's almost whatever. Like, I shouldn't say whatever. Obviously, that enables all of this stuff, but it's only cool to the extent that it enables our ability to do the work we're able to do internally with the team that we have and the systems we're building.
So I'm fascinated by this, and just the like waterfall's a good analogy, right? Like the cascade of things of, one abundance creates the next scarcity, right? Like, congratulations, you have high lead flow. Now we don't have good screening processes. Great. Now we have good screening processes, but it's working and we just have too many leads to close. Now we're closing the leads, but who serves them? Okay, now we're serving them, but are we doing it consistently? Okay, now we're serving them consistently, but how you train the next people to do it consistently? Okay, now that you've trained them, how you make sure they actually stay? So I'm just like, you have so lived each of those steps. So I would love to just at least like take a few moments now to go into like each of these of, you've really done and lived it and solved some of these problems real time as the business has grown quickly in the past couple of years. So I'm really interested to to hear how you tackled some of these. I guess just starting with okay, like we're getting lead flow, but right, in traditional sense, not all of them are qualified leads, right? We're getting leads, and some of them are people who want to buy hourly services, and we don't do hourly here. So, how did you start solving for expectations and screening leads? Like, what did you do to try to get this filtering to work better?
Yeah, that was probably the simplest. I think when you start, you want as little friction as possible for people to be able to reach out to you. So stick your Calendly link anywhere and everywhere, and hope people book calls. And that's kind of what you need to do. You need to get a whole bunch of reps, and it's maybe more of a volume game, but you're willing to play that game because you have the time to commit to it. Once that's not working, then we do need to create more friction, and that friction is simply, instead of just embedding a Calendly link in our website or show notes or whatever, it's more of a start here flow, and it's maybe an embedded jot form or type form or some type of a tool that essentially collects a little bit of information about the client. But most importantly, it's like, if you go through our flow, it's here is exactly how we charge. Here is our exact fee schedule. Here is how that works out. Um, let's do you a favor and us a favor. If that's not what you're looking for, um, let's not waste 30 minutes of time to figure that out on the back end at the end of our call when they ask, well, how do you charge? So that's just putting that bit of friction up there, putting a bit of friction of asking for certain information, whether it's income or asset level. What are you looking for? So you can ideally get to that sales call and have some relevant information. Know, is this actually someone we can work with? Or is this someone that's a completely different demographic with completely different advising needs that maybe we're not the best equipped to work with? So that's pretty simple. It's just removing the direct access to your calendar with some type of a friction creating tool like a jot form or a type form that then on the back end has a link to your Calendly if the right steps are taken or if they acknowledge or agree to the way you do things.
So I was going to ask in that regard, if and even there, I mean, there's questions like, um, do I just put a thing that outright says, you have to check a button that says I can meet your $2 million minimums or it rejects you? Or do we just kind of acknowledge like, hey, we typically work with clients that have at least $2 million. Please share some more information about your financial situation here. And I'll still take the call. If you're scared off by 2 million, you'll opt out. But I'm not going to like force you to like pass a thing on the form that says it. I might still be willing to have the conversation because maybe you're close and there's circumstances that make this work. So I guess I'm curious, like where was your balance between I'm going to tell people and set the expectation, but I'm going to let them choose whether to schedule the meeting anyways. Uh, well, versus no, like you just literally have to answer these things or satisfy these, checkboxes or requests or whatever it is, or you're just not allowed to schedule a meeting with us.
It depends upon bandwidth. We were at the point where it's pretty binary for us. It's either you do or you don't, and that's just, as we mentioned before, there's not a problem of scarcity, there's a problem of abundance, and so we do have to prioritize. That being said, like, we're super open. We last summer, I think it was last July, we had a webinar called Here's Root's Master Plan, and we talked about our minimums, and we talked about our vision, we talked about why do we exist, and we talked about profitability. And this was something that clients were invited to, prospects were invited to, the industry was invited. It's living on YouTube if anyone wants to go see it. It was essentially us saying, here is why Root exists, and this is why we have this minimum, and this means that a lot of you listening who have been reaching out, we want to be open about why we can't work with you, although we hope to be able to in the future. We have a Root Collective, which is like our community. We have, I think, 2,700, 2,800 members in it, completely free. We're open about it. Like, there's nothing that I think we tell people exactly why we have that minimum and the reason for it. There have been some cases where people they, for lack of a better word, have fallen in love with the service or the brand or the company. It's like, hey, we watch every single thing you guys put out. We watch the master plan. We know all of your advisors. We watch your YouTube lives. So Ari, our chief growth officer, has a lot of our advisors on and just talks about them and highlights them. And so they know everything about what we're doing. And like, can we please work with you? We got 1.8 or 1.5, or hey, look, we're going to be there. And so I'm not going to say we've never made exceptions, but we do have a pretty hard stance. And it's not because of a exclusivity thing. It's because of having that hard stance enables us to get to where we want to go faster, to be able to drop that minimum down and to be able to serve more people. So it is a pretty binary thing. If you don't have it, I think the way the type form works is one of the questions is what is your portfolio balance, and it's like under 2, 2 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, like whatever the thresholds are. And if you're answering under the 2 million, it gives you a message, and I think it even redirects, or at least it used to. I don't know what it does anymore, to a video of, hey, our mission is to drive this down. Unfortunately, today we do have this pretty hard minimum. We hope to be able to serve you in the future. So it wasn't like just a hard, cold, we don't want you. It was we do want to serve you, but this is why we're doing the way we're doing things. And please stay in touch. And as we grow, maybe we can work together in the future.
So this ideally makes sales calls, approach calls, prospect calls more efficient, because we're at least generally only talking to people who really are pretty qualified and actually understand how we charge and what we do and what our minimums are. So you said like that was working, except now as the volume continues, at some point the bottleneck is still you, because even as after you filtered them, you, James, are still the one that's answering all the phone calls and trying to figure out whether people are the right fit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that was the bottleneck.
Yeah.
And
so what do you do?
This was one that I just had to wrestle with, like, oh, they watched my YouTube video or my podcast. I feel like I have to be the one on the initial call. And this is where Brad Johnson, who has the Do Business, Do Life podcast, formerly had the Elite Advisor Blueprint podcast, he talked about the importance, and Brad's great. We actually have a monthly call and we talk about a lot of stuff, but I don't know when this was maybe 6-7 years ago. He had an episode that stuck with me about the importance of standardizing and naming. And then he even said, I think like trademarking your process. And I never got that when I was just a solo advisor. Like, why does that actually matter? People are buying me, they're not buying the process. And I think that as a solo advisor, the corporate brand is the personal brand. There's not really a differentiation. But as you grow, if you want to grow, what I realize is we need to start elevating the corporate brand, or the brand, the company brand. The process that people go through is what needs to be special, not James going through it with them. And so that's where we rolled out our Sequoia system. It's not, hey, you're going to have a call with James, or you're going to have a call with Chris, or you're going to have a call with Ari. It was the three of us in the early days. It was, you're going to have a call, and we're going to walk through our Sequoia system. And we put a lot of time and effort into like, what should be the order in which we do things? How do we? Because I think for the most part, it used to be, okay, a client calls, cool. Or a prospect. Let's just say, what questions do you have? What causes you to reach? Like, where do you want to start? And it was very much driven by the prospect and what their pain points were. And I think to an extent it needs to be that, but you also need to be able to say, we've worked with hundreds of people with similar problems and similar challenges just like you. And in our experience, we have found that there is a right way of doing this to make sure that the question you're asking, we have the proper context, and everything in your plan is foundationally built on top of the right thing first, then kind of like a progression of the way you go through things. And so we put a lot of time and energy into saying, how do we first create the Sequoia system of what do we want the prospect to client process to look like, to feel like we're talking about just the core planning domains, but in the appropriate order to make sense of it all. And so that each meeting should be building upon the last, not feeling like a one-off or a disconnected, disjointed, singular thing. We put a lot of time into doing that, and a lot of time into how do we brand that? How do we take people to that? How do we promote that and elevate that and really highlight that as the thing that people are buying or getting, not a call with James or a call with Ari or a call with Chris. And so that took some time, but we were able to figure that out. So that became, and also as we grew, that became easier. When it was just the website was me, Ari, Chris, Dan, we were the first four. People were just expecting that I was going to be the one they were talking to and meeting with. And at that time, I was still serving as advisor to a lot of them. As we grew, I think that helped people just say, okay, I recognize it's not James or Ari. Ari also has a podcast and a YouTube channel that's done really well. They started to just, I think, assume, okay, I'm not probably working with James or Ari. And by the way, it's probably like we have insanely talented advisors who are so good at what they do that this just helped to reinforce that and to show whether you're working with Chris or Jordan or Chelsea or whoever it is, you're going to get the same experience. The personality of the advisor that you're doing this with is going to be different. Obviously, maybe their unique experience is going to be different, but when you standardize that process, it was actually a very compelling thing to a lot of people that this isn't just a roof with a bunch of one-off disjointed advisors underneath it, but this is actually a business that has a way of doing things, a way of training on these things, a way of standardizing these things that actually provides confidence to a lot of clients that it's not advisor dependent. Your experience is not advisor dependent. You're going to get that same thing across the board.
I'm struck by this. Just there are elements in what you're saying that are like, and I feel like kind of antithetical, like opposite to how the way a lot of us are trained, right? Like you embodied part of it well earlier, like I'll call it the traditional approach, right? A prospect calls and the conversation's very centered on the prospect, right? What questions do you have? What problems do you have? Tell me about the pain points you have. And basically my goal is to hear their pain points, make them feel heard about their pain points, and then connect and explain how my solutions can help solve their pain points. And if I do that well, I get to win another meeting. And at least for what I'm hearing you saying and describing, like when you get a higher volume lead flow and have a reasonable process to qualify them and content that's really targeted to make sure that most of them who are showing up really are in your sweet spot, then the conversation is not so much like, thank you for calling, tell me about your pain points, the problems you have. It's, I'm so glad you contacted us because we work with people just like you. We're very familiar with the problems that are just like you. In fact, we probably know more about the problems you have that you didn't even realize that you have, but we know that you have them. We'll point out how you have them, and then we'll have the solution already for you because this is what we do here. And suddenly the conversation is a little bit less, Mr. and Mrs. Client, tell me about all the things that you're dealing with. And it's a little bit more, I know what you're dealing with. Let me show you how we've got depth of expertise in people just like you, because that builds confidence in them to say, well, yeah, it looks like these people really do know exactly how to help us. Like they know our problems better than we can articulate our problems.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and I think the business side of that too is I've heard you talk about client acquisition costs before, Michael, and I hear all these advisors say, "No, I don't. I don't. I just it's time. I don't actually spend anything on Facebook marketing or ads or whatever." And what
Yeah.
they fail to recognize is they've spent 50 collective hours at all their different networking groups and whatever they're doing with their
Yep.
time just to get two leads, and maybe one of those two leads converts, and it's an
Right.
enormous client
And
acquisition cost.
and when your time's worth a couple $100 an hour, it's like, yeah, that was actually a $10,000 to $15,000 lead. It was all
Yes,
time,
yes,
but that was a $10,000 to $15,000 lead.
exactly. And so I guess the beauty of YouTube, the beauty of podcasts, the video, just beauty of media in general is it is infinitely scalable. And so not only do we attract prospects with that, but as a part, once they schedule a meeting, the automated um, emails that they're going to get, the common questions that we're going to address, even if you go to our website or the free, like, what does this process look like? It is just really cutting down that client acquisition cost because it's now to a point where by the time they're actually talking to Ari or Jay, who are running our initial explore meetings, it's a 30-minute conversation and they either move forward or they don't, because so much of what they're going to ask about, tell me about yourselves, tell me about your services, can I talk to whatever it is, that has already been addressed. And so the client acquisition cost shrinks enormously. And it just the unit economics of it make way more sense with how can you grow fast when it typically takes a lot of time for just payback of breaking even on what you spend to acquire a client, or what the long-term value of a client is worth, or just any of these different things. um, it is that's probably one of the biggest things that's allowed us to grow pretty quickly. Is it's not a super long sales cycle, it's not a super long payback cycle. It's something that a new advisor can do, start today, and within 30 to 60 days they're onboarding a good number of clients because they've been trained on our process. And that's maybe the other thing is these videos. At first, it was obviously to say, how do we get in front of prospects? But one of the coolest thing is when we open up a new job, it's people who've also been watching our videos applying, and so they get our process and our system, and even how we talk about things, and the things we talk about that we feel make us different. And so when a new team member comes on board, it's not the client acquisition cost, but the talent acquisition cost is equally low. And so it just makes for a very seamless experience of onboarding really wonderful people to help us in this mission that we have to do what we're trying to do. And video is kind of that first thing that is, because of how leveraged it is, allows us to do that at very low cost.
So, help me understand more how the sales process evolved. I guess like who's doing the sales process? Because I'm reading between lines. It sounds like there were a couple of different stages. Like there was a version where it was you, because we're all founder led at first. Then there was a version where it was multiple advisors who were doing it. And then it sounded like at one point that shifted a little bit further, because eventually like you're pairing them to the right advisor, which means I'm assuming not all advisors actually end up doing their own sales process at that point. So can you walk us through like how the who of the sales process changed and evolved?
Mm-hmm. It was me at the beginning. I became the bottleneck. That became grossly inefficient, especially when it was like, oh, I'm talking to James. Cool. This is the guy whose videos I've been watching. And then I'm saying, hey, you're going to work with this other advisor who is absolutely every bit as good, the same quality advisor, but they just don't have that relationship. So to the prospect, it felt like a letdown just because they didn't know that other advisor. They weren't on video or podcast like they had developed that relationship with me. So we got out of that. We fixed that. And it was okay. Now prospects are going to come in. It's just going to be a bit of a round robin of whatever advisor happens to be available at the time that you want to speak. That's who you're going to talk to. And that was the second iteration of it. But the problem we found with that was I guess this is how a lot of people do it, but it was just, now you have advisors. In the way we were running it at that time was there was an intro call just to kind of tell you what we do, how we do it, pitch you essentially like, hey, let's set up a discovery meeting where we're going to actually learn more, just the standard stuff. So an intro call, maybe 30 minutes, into a discovery meeting, into kind of like a planned presentation meeting. So it's 3 full meetings, which is a lot of time. And in between those meetings, advisors are trying to balance, and this is just the industry as a whole, not just us specifically at Root, but you're trying to serve clients, you're trying to be responsive, you're trying to be proactive, and at the same time, you're trying to prep for new clients, and you're trying to prepare for the kickoff meeting and the discovery meeting, whatever. You're trying to chase them down to get to an answer. Do you want to move forward? Do you not? And we had Ari who came to me and said, hey, I'm going to test something. I'm going to test he said, I think that people like what we're doing so much that we're wasting our time going through these 3 meetings. They're getting to the point where they're saying, why are we wasting so much? Like, we'd want to work with you. What are you taking us through these 3 meetings for? We've already made up our minds essentially. And so Ari came to me and he said, I'm going to test a 1 meeting close. Essentially, the client prospect's going to book. I'm going to walk them through what we do. I'm going to ask what questions they have. I'm going to show them where in the process those questions are going to be addressed and what the outcome is going to look like. And then essentially just say, do you want to move forward or not? And he had incredible success with that. And so he said, okay, well, why don't we just implement this across the board? How much time would this save advisors if 20, 30, 40% of their week sometimes is now freed up because they're not having to do the kickoff or the intro meeting, the discovery meeting, the plan presentation meeting, the chasing down statements back and forth. Now advisors can just do excellent advisory work. And we had a centralized team, which at the time was just 1 person, who's spending 30 minutes to 40 minutes with each prospective client. And in doing so, actually had a higher close rate because that's actually what people are wanting. So that was the final iteration. We've even expanded on that even just a bit more. Even as we're speaking, we're going through that process, but that's kind of where we are / moving even to a more streamlined process, but 1 call with someone from our client success team, essentially the sales team, to say, here's what we do and how we do it. And here's the advisor that we think you'd work well with. And then they sign the agreement and they have a kickoff meeting with their advisor.
And so they don't even find out who they're working with until after they say yes.
Correct. That's what we're actually implementing right now. Ari's done a really good job of, on his YouTube channel, he'll highlight a lot of our awesome advisors. He'll have them on and they'll walk through a case study, or they'll take questions, or they'll do whatever. And so now it's getting to the point where people are getting to see, oh, there's some really amazing people at Root. And, I saw Caleb's episode. I really want to work with Caleb. Or I saw Naomi's episode. I really want to work with Naomi. And so now we have what we're calling the priority path, where if you go to our website and you're like, I'm in, and I already know which advisor I want to work with, you can just select that advisor directly and schedule a kickoff meeting with them. And it even skips the initial sales call, explore call.
Interesting. And I'm fascinated just by that evolution. I guess the asterisk to it all is it's all predicated on, because they're consuming so much of the YouTube content in the first place, that they've already gotten familiar with the firm, understand your style and approach, have decided they like you as human beings and believe in the firm and the brand. So just there's a lot of earn credibility and show your expertise layers that often crop up in a sales process that you just don't have to do because the content's already doing it for you. So such that, as you said, like by the time they show up with you, they already basically know they want to work with you. They've just got particular questions. They want to understand the process and make sure that they've got buy-in to what they're buying, and then they can move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not even the content's evolved a lot. Where yes, there's the information-based content that is a lot of what I talk about on the YouTube channel, what Ari talks about on his, and then Ari and I started doing what we call a Root Talks channel, where we have our own personal YouTube pages, and then there's a corporate company page. And on this, we talk like, how do we structure teams at Root? And you would be surprised at how many clients and prospects love that. They love seeing the intentionality behind why we do what we do. Why do we have head of people, head of brand culture? What's the importance of that, and how does that actually serve clients? They love us talking about that. I recently rolled out I call the Root Ready podcast. To us, we want it to mean something to work at Root. The vision is, it's a lot of CFPs, and I think that's cool, and I think that that's a good maybe standard to have of working with an advisor. But there's a lot of CFPs that I wouldn't work with. I wouldn't want at Root. There's a lot that I would. So how do we turn Root into that standard that if you work at, having the CFP is cool, and the CFP is great. I think we require it for all of our lead advisors, but that's good. Knowing that your advisor works at Root, knowing that they've gone through Root's curriculum and are held to Root standards, that actually means a lot to me as a consumer, and trying to make it mean something to work at Root. And so we rolled out the Root Ready podcast of here's how we define Root Ready for our advisors. Here's our standards of excellence. Here's what we expect of you, because we expect a lot for our clients. And here's how we do all this stuff. And so maybe one of the biggest things in even the last 6 months, 12 months is not just the information-based content that shows expertise, but the content that gives people a peek behind the scenes. Here's the intention that's gone behind designing career paths, designing training, designing standards, designing this team that ultimately is going to be responsible for serving you as the client. And there's a lot of comfort that I think that instills when clients see that this isn't just a nice dog and pony show of cool, they talk the big game and then they just funnel clients and assets in the door and don't really care what happens after that. Is that they do really care, and they do really want this to be an exceptional experience in the gold standard for what it looks like to have top-notch, top-quality financial advice as a consumer.
So then share with us a little bit more about what the Sequoia system is, that this process you have standardized that you're training on.
So the Sequoia system, the first meeting, so this is all, it's all CFP curriculum, but how do you organize it? How do you communicate it? How do you connect the dots? So that when you're talking about insurance and you're talking about taxes and you're talking about withdrawal strategies, there's the red thread that connects all of them. So when someone becomes a client, the first meeting is a kickoff meeting. And the kickoff meeting is just, of course, before I'm going to talk to you about, this is nothing different than any other advisor does, but it's just the way it's organized. Before I talk to you about specifics and recommendations, I need to understand, and I need to ask the right types of questions to understand Michael at a really deep level and actually understand what's important to you and what we're trying to accomplish here. So obviously everyone listening to this podcast probably does that in their own version, but that's the kickoff meeting. From there, it's the income and the cash flow meeting. But now we're going to come back to you. We're using Right Capital. We're going to present your actual retirement plan. Can you retire? When can you retire? How much can you spend? What does that look like? We haven't really done a lot of the optimization yet because we're building this progressively. We start with the foundation of you and your vision for what you want to do. Then the first question is, can we do this? Do we have the cash flow to be able to do this? And what does that look like? Then from there, it's the progression. Now we're going to talk about investments because we know what your income from your portfolio needs to look like to support your retirement needs. Now we can work backwards into understanding how should we invest your portfolio to support that. Then from there, once we know how your portfolio is allocated, We can run some projections on where might your different account balances be by the time required minimum distribution age begins. We can run some projections on what might we be expecting in terms of gains realized over the years based upon where we might be withdrawing from first. So now we can actually get a good sense of what your tax strategy should be, of how should we balance Roth conversions with charitable giving strategies, with tax loss or tax gain harvesting, with understanding what tax thresholds, marginal thresholds we expect you to be at over the next number of years. Obviously, this is just a best guess, as people know, listeners know, if we can't predict the future, but we can at least have a baseline and start to come up with what tax strategies should we be thinking about and monitoring year by year to minimize your lifetime tax liability. Then from there is a security meeting of now how do we make sure that all this is protected with the right insurance coverages, the right estate documents in place. Then from there, they have completed our onboarding. So that is the Sequoia system. Root University is what we designed to say, how do we train on each meeting? How do you run each meeting? It's not enough to have the technical expertise of what to do in each of those. How do you open the meeting? How do you connect when you open that investment meeting? Hey, as a reminder, here's where we left off. Here's what we did in your last meeting with your income plan and your retirement plan. Because of that, here's now what we're going to be talking about, X, Y, and Z for you when it comes to your investment. So how do you frame the conversation? How do you structure the meeting? What do you not talk about in each? For example, in the kickoff meeting, you're not talking about solutions. You're not talking about recommendations. This is just your chance to ask the right questions and be quiet and really build that trust and understand who your client is. So there's just a lot of resources there. And then what we're in the process of building out now is what does this look like on an ongoing basis to ensure that once the client is onboarded and we have at least these core areas. Obviously, every client's going to have the nuanced things, the one-off things that are not going to be totally standardized, but this gives us that structure that we feel like you have a complete plan once you've gone through this. Now, how do we on an ongoing basis define what it looks like for us to continue to monitor that and to evaluate that and to ensure that we're always staying on top of that on an ongoing basis? So Sequoia system is that process. Root University is our internal structure for how do we train advisors on that process? How do we run each meeting? What does it look like? What's an example of what that outcome should be or how that meeting is run so we can train advisors to do it really well.
And so the core process is 5 meetings, if I'm following that, like discovery, income, investments, retirement and tax projections, and then the security layer.
At its most simple level, yes, sometimes those meetings you need to do it. You need a couple meetings to go over investments or a couple meetings to go over taxes or a couple to go over maybe even 3. But yes, at its most simple level, we have to make there's things that we're making sure we're covering at each step of the way.
So how long are meetings and how long does it take to get clients all the way through this cycle then?
Meetings are generally 45 minutes. And to get all the way through that cycle, if you space each one out 1 to 2 weeks, usually within 2 months or so, you're fully through that. And obviously it's dependent upon client availability, advisor availability, but within 2 months, 3 months, you have that foundational plan built out.
So I'm assuming it's intentional to keep the meetings, I guess I would characterize fairly short. I mean, a lot of advisory firms end out with hour to an hour and a half planning meetings. So 45 minutes feels like some intentionality to say we really don't actually want these meetings to be terribly long.
Yeah, I think that when meetings run much longer, it's usually a lack of discipline on the advisor side, or it's trying to do too much at once. And maybe the advisor likes that because the advisor's in this all day and obviously likes this stuff and can connect the dots really quickly about what's going on. But this is completely, maybe not brand new stuff to clients, but anytime you learn something new, there's only so much of it that you can take before you stop absorbing what's actually being presented. So it is designed to be very focused on each meeting has a very specific purpose. I used to do it differently, I think as most advisors did, of, here's your retirement plan. And because of this, let's talk about the way you should be invested within this strategy. And because of these investments that we're going to have, here's what taxes are going to look like, or at least maybe a preliminary look at what the Roth conversion strategy might look like. And that would be an hour and a half and you got it all done. But I remember thinking, I don't think clients are really walking away feeling like they remembered everything. They liked it all, but I don't think that they couldn't tell me what we just did and why it's important to their plan. Whereas the dual benefit of this is I do think that they walk away with, when you keep the focus tight, it's more impactful for them and it's just easier to train. If I'm going to train a new advisor on, yeah, you're going to go in the meeting, you're going to talk about all these things, but you kind of have to, use your discretion of when to talk about that and when not to talk about this. And how does that's much more difficult to train than if I say, here's what we're looking at and here's how we should run it and here's what we are doing and not doing. A big part of what we're trying to do is that training piece, the training and development of making it so that associate advisors have this progression and this ability to train in hyper specific ways to be able to be the best advisors they can.
So then, who builds this out in Root University?
Myself and Carly did at the beginning. This was maybe starting a year ago. Carly's our head of internal development now. At the time, she was an advisor. It's all built out in Monday boards right now. There's just a progression of, as I mentioned, here's what each meeting is, here's agendas, here's resources, I did Loom videos of every single meeting of here's how I'd open the meeting. It's a 4-minute video of kind of role playing what that looks like. Here's what I would do next. Here's what I do next. Here's what I do next. Here's how I'd close the meeting. Here's how I'd tie what we talked about today and set the stage to say, because of this and because of what we looked at today, here's what we're going to spend a lot of time focusing on in the next meeting. And here's a way in which this connects. And so it's a lot of Loom videos, text, just meeting structure stuff, but it lives in a Monday.com is the tool, a Monday board right now.
Oh, interesting. So this isn't a whole we bought a learning management system and built out all this course material. This sounds a little more just straightforward. Like, we're going fast, we just got to get stuff done. It's like, I just recorded the things that I do and I put them in a sequence and it's in a Monday board and everybody can learn.
Yeah, and the Monday board's super well organized and it serves everything we need right now. Just yesterday even I had a good call with the learning management system to see there's some benefits of that in terms of quizzes, reinforcement, tracking progression, kind of manager oversight to see who's done what and how can we apply certain. So there's some benefits of that, but right now it's serving its purpose and we're exploring ways to even enhance it further.
So now take us all the way back to the YouTube journey. So when last we heard, you made the initial 5 videos, it took a ton of time. There were 3 views. You said, forget it, this ain't happening. It sat there for 8 months, and then suddenly YouTube algorithms started doing their thing and surfaced the video, and it started to get some conversation and engagement. So I'm presuming at this point you got drawn back into doing YouTube after all, because here we are. But take us further into the story again of what started to change. What did you then start doing on YouTube?
Yeah, I feel the answer is sometimes it just started doing it weekly. There probably is some formula. I don't know what it is. I think we're doing something well, but we just have started doing it at least weekly. There's sometimes we're even doing it for a lot of times actually 2 videos a week. But since I think fall, maybe July of 2021, just committing to doing at least 1 video every single week. I think the biggest thing with YouTube is the people that are watching YouTube videos, they're not the type of people that are going to hire you if you are nice to them and call them on their birthdays and think that that's your number one job as their advisor. There's some level of depth that they're looking for. They're not, a lot of them are do-it-yourselfers. And I mentioned that we ran into what I thought was the promised land of, we just booked 25 calls, and turns out they're all kind of do-it-yourselfers just looking for a second opinion. But there are, even the people that are looking for guidance, there's probably some level of depth to what they're looking for. So I've had other advisors, or I've heard them say, YouTube's not really working. What are you doing? I've watched their channel. This is maybe 2 people or 3 people. And it's just almost like, this is painfully obvious, the stuff that you're talking about. You have to put some level of depth into what you're doing. If they could easily one person, why should you collect Social Security at 63? Well, it's more than if you had collected at 62. It's like, well, come on. You do need to put a little bit more effort into what you're going to do to add value to the types of people that are watching. They're going to tend to know a little bit at least about financial stuff. And so how can you, I don't know, just spend time saying, how can I make this video as valuable as possible? And that's where the time should actually be spent, is on the outline and the thinking and the depth that you want to go over, that you might spend a couple hours on an outline for a video that only ends up being 10, 12 minutes. But it seems like there's a lot of people that think that YouTube's just going to crack the code just by the nature of doing a YouTube video. But if you watch it, there's really nothing that it's so obvious, or the information's so just maybe shallow that it's not going to strike anyone as compelling in any way.
So then how long do you make your videos? Like, how deep do you go? Is it also 25 minutes the way that the podcast was, or is it different?
I think on average they're between 12 and 18 minutes. A lot of times I'll just do a case study. I'll say, hey, here's a sample client. Here's how much they have. They want to retire. Here's actually me sharing my screen and going through in our planning software what that might look like, what things we would look at. I don't have a target. I try to be, and I fail at this a lot, but how do you deliver the most information possible in the most concise way possible? And I don't think, I know I'm not as concise as I need to be. Like if I watch a video back, I'll realize I'm saying the same thing 5 times in a row before I move on. I need to be better about doing that. But I think that somewhere maybe in that 10 to 15 minute spot tends to be not like a target, but just a natural right time frame for what I'm trying to explain.
So notwithstanding all of the modern society, people have no attention spans. Everything's got to be 30 to 45 seconds and moving on. Like your success is coming because it sounds like you're specifically going deeper and actually really trying to teach something new to someone that obviously is here to learn, but probably at least knows a few things because they're consuming high volumes of content on YouTube. So they're probably not looking for simple answers. They could just Google. They're looking for something deeper. You're trying to go deeper, and they actually do stick with you when you take some time to go deeper.
Yeah. And even if they don't understand exactly what you're saying, by at least going into some depth, it's conveying the fact that, okay, you know what you're talking about. I trust that you know what you're talking about because of the way in which you speak with authority on the subject. I'm going to feel comfortable at least reaching out to you and your firm to see if you could apply that same approach to my situation.
And so can you share a little bit more of what topics do you cover? Like what do you dig into?
Yeah, social security strategies, a lot of case studies, as I mentioned. Let me pull up even what I've done recently. It's with withdrawal strategies. How should you think about how much you can withdraw from your portfolio? How do you think about how much you should have in stocks to bonds? I mean, the good thing about YouTube is it's public, so people can go just check out everything that's on there. A lot of it's not even financial. It's here's retirement regrets that I've heard people say looking back upon their retirement, or here's the things I wish I had known, or here's the things that are non-financial that you're gonna realize when you do retire. So it's a mix of technical stuff, actually probably very little investment stuff outside of just general asset allocation guidance, and then even maybe like not financial psychology stuff, but overall, here's what you're going to wish you had known. Here's some of the things that you're going to feel, whether it's maybe loneliness or lack of purpose or whatever, the things that are real that clients talk about when they retire that I think a lot of people on the cusp of retirement are wanting to know about.
Well, and I was struck. I remember seeing some of your content a ways back, and you often had interesting ways to work in some of the target clientele dynamics, right? Like I think I remember one, it was a like, how much can I expect to spend in retirement? But it wasn't. It was how much can I expect to spend in retirement for a $2 million portfolio? So it's like nice subtle way that like if you have $2 million, this you're probably more likely to check out this video, because if you only have $200,000, it's probably not going to feel really relevant to see the video about what do you do with $2 million, because I don't have $2 million. Like it was a really interesting way to say, like, how do I get in front of people who have the dollars that I want to work with without just saying, like, if you have $2 million, please call us. It was, I at least as a student of the business, like it was noticeable to me. I think there was one like, what can you spend from a $2 million portfolio? There was another one that's like, here's what a $3 million retirement looks like. And I just, from mine was like, okay, so you're you're trying to get in front of the people that you want by kind of putting some numbers out there that presumably people with those dollar amounts will come check out.
Yeah, you could get a lot of views talking about best credit cards, other hacky things like, I shouldn't say hacky, but you're going to get a lot of views, but this, I don't know if that's going to lead to the types of clients that you want to get. And so how do you balance that? As you mentioned earlier, the subscribers are definitely a part of it, but if those subscribers aren't the types of people that you are, if you're not in it for the actual subscribers, the YouTube revenue, but you're in it for the business development, then tailor your content towards what the actual outcome you want is.
And so I'm also so on the one hand, I'm struck that it's still all you doing it. I mean, you said like a 40-person team. I guess you noted Ari has a podcast YouTube channel as well, but it still seems to be all you visibly doing this, even though almost no one, or actually no one, gets you as their advisor, because now you have a team and lots of advisors. So I guess I'm curious to hear more about, as you've gone through all this growth evolution, like what have you kept, what have you delegated, even of the podcast and video, like which parts do you actually do, and what does team do now? Like how has that role in your time evolved?
Last year, so at the beginning of 2024 is when we got to the point that I realized it probably just wasn't going to be a good idea I had stopped taking on clients at that point, but I realized it's just not going to be the best thing to keep being the advisor to client. So I went through and transitioned almost all. I still maybe have a couple of clients that I wouldn't say I'm the lead advisor on, but I'm still involved in the relationship. Um, but made a really big effort beginning of 2024 to transition just called 98% of all clients to other advisors so that my time could be spent on um, obviously the content stuff is a big piece of it, but even more so is a lot of my time and attention right now is on how do we develop the systems and the infrastructure to make this the place that the most talented people can come and feel like they have a career here and can be developed and learned and coached and have an amazing career for them, their family, all this stuff. And so a lot of my time is on just, I guess, the growing the team, but also in building the infrastructure to say how do we support the best and the brightest here, because I think the thing that we want, our vision is how do we make Root um, the best place in America to work. How do we make this the most fun place in America to work? And I use the word fun. I have to kind of define what I mean by fun, but like fun is not just the ping pong tables and foosball stuff. That's maybe an element of it, but like it's fun to feel like we're part of something that's winning. It's fun to feel like we're, and not winning in terms of competition, but like look, there's success happening. This is working. It's fun to be part of the transformation we see with clients. We have a channel in Slack where anytime a new client comes on, the advisor that's working with them gives a little snippet of here's a client, we're so excited to work with them, here's a bit about how they found us, what they're looking to do. And it's really cool to see. These are really amazing people that we get to work with, and it's fun to be part of that transformation. It's fun to be part of a high performing team. It's fun to be part of something that is actually fun. We had our team retreat back in February, and it was one of the most fun times a lot of us have had in a very long time. We have very fun people on the team. So how do we
What
continue?
what was your team retreat? Like what did you do for a team retreat?
We went, so Palm Springs is in the desert here out in California, east of Los Angeles. We got a few villas out there, and we had 40 people on the team at the time. And we just came and did that. And so we got together. It was catered dinner every night. We had Root Olympics. So internally, we have team Aspen, Banyan, Canopy. Those are our advisory teams, kind of time zone dependent. And so we had those teams. We have another fourth team. Those like people that aren't on an advisory team, but we had Root Olympics. It's everything from Lego building competitions to pickleball to mini golf to Jenga to cornhole, just all these really just fun games. We had a casino night. We went golfing, or there's like team outings, hiked Joshua Tree. We had a coach come in from Blanchard and company and kind of just deliver like coaching standards. How can we continue to develop and invest in each other and be better coaches to each other? We had kind of like where is Root? Like, why do we exist? And a reaffirmation of where are we going and why does what we're doing matter? And what is the unique contribution that every single person in this room is making towards doing that? So that was like a legitimately fun thing where it was, everyone was just connecting so well. It was fun to be part of a company event where it wasn't like, okay, I have to be here and I can't wait to get back home to my family. It was like, yeah, I can't wait to get back home to my family, but I love being here. I love being able to connect with these people that truly do feel like friends and do truly feel like people that I feel challenged by in a healthy way. Like, this person's excellent at what they do, so do I want to be as well. But they're also hyper just relational, and they're great people, and they're people I love connecting with and having fun with. And so we just had tons of fun. People can go to our company page, Root Financial, on LinkedIn, and we have a video on that and just kind of highlighting some of the things that we did. But it was awesome. And it's like, that's an actual example of just, it was very fun. And now that we're growing, we're working through how do we do that at the team level as well, so that Team Aspen can get together and do like these we call them our petite retreats, like these mini get-togethers that are more centrally time zone related. And Team Aspen can do something, Team Banyan can do something, and so that we still have that all team get together that will continue to grow and evolve over time, but also doing other events together, because we are fully remote. But there's something that can't be replaced by that actual time spent with one another.
So all this growth, your team is remote. There's not a central office. Like the team retreat is when they come together.
Yeah, we have a central office, and we have an alpha space in Encinitas, California. It's 900 square feet, and 2 of us work here. So it's not. It's that's it. Everything else, it is entirely remote, but we do have a tiny little office here in California.
So as you look at growth from I guess even first, so just as you look back, like what's surprised you the most about this like path and trajectory of building a fast growing advisory business?
I think just that it would be fun to do it with a team. I worked at a previous firm before starting Root, and it kind of felt like a revolving door, people in and out, and it just felt like, oh, I'm not a good manager because people aren't staying. I don't want to train them because I know they're not going to be here for that long. And you started to be like, it would be easier to do this alone. And I remember when I started Root, I just spent a day at a campsite down here, San Elijo. There's this campsite near where I live, and just wrote down, what do I actually want Root to be, and kind of pros and cons of each. Do you do the hyper lean solo advisory firm? There's benefits of that. There's also downsides of that. Do you grow a team? And I remember going into that thinking, I'm obviously I don't know what Root's going to become, but I feel pretty good. That's probably just going to be like a very lean thing, because I don't want to have to manage people. But the team has grown, but I feel like there's zero element of having to manage people, because if you have the right structure in place and if you get the right people on the team, it actually is tons of fun. And if you don't have the right structure, it's a total nightmare. Not good for anyone. Managing people is not fun. But if it's more of a build the right culture, build the right structure, build the right paths for the right people to operate in, I was really surprised about how much fun just that aspect of the job would be.
So then what was the low point for you?
The low point was starting. I got fired from my last job and was about $140,000 in debt with no savings, which is a story for another time. But starting Root with that was definitely a low point.
And so how long did it take before you figured out if it was even going to survive and work?
Well, 9 to 12 months probably. I was single, paying very little in rent at the time, so I didn't need a ton to survive. But I remember, I think at the 12-month mark, it's like, okay, it's 9 months. I could kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. I knew this is gonna. I guess I never thought it wasn't going to work, but at 9 months, I felt like, okay, that we're about to cross that tipping point, that things are going to be okay.
So what do you know now you wish you could go back and tell you from 5-10 years ago as you were early stages in getting this started?
I remember when I was at my previous firm, thinking to be a successful advisor, I would listen to you. I would see people like Ron or Omani Carson, think, okay, that's what a successful advisor looks like. And there's such a big gap between who they are and who I am. And so I remember going to a broker-dealer conference at my previous firm, and I don't know how to say it without being condescending, but you meet a lot of people that you just, to put it lightly, they're less impressive than the Michael Kitseys and the Omani Carsons of the world. And then you start to realize, okay, maybe it doesn't take that much to actually be a successful advisor. So I think that's, I don't even know if I wish I knew that, because I think that seeing that gap it kind of pushed me to become, how can I be better and sharper and more knowledgeable? And it was a little bit of a driving force to see what excellence looked like, but to experience later on, the rest, these are just people doing their jobs. And by definition, most people are just average people. So if you can be a little bit above average, you're probably going to have some success.
So, what other advice would you give younger, newer advisors like coming into the profession today?
I would tell them to join Root and to listen to the Root Ready podcast. Obviously, half joking there. I would say listen to the Root Ready podcast. I did roll that out and create that to be a tool for growth-minded, specifically kind of people in that associate advisor role looking to say, how can I progress beyond just understand the technical components of this job? So yeah, listen to the Root Ready podcast. I think I share a lot on there about how to be a better advisor. I'll share stories about successes and failures along the way, but that would be my number one thing.
So what comes next for you and Root? I mean, you've got this just rip roaring like 100% organic growth rate you're staring down this year. Like, how do you think about the business over 3 years, over 10 years? Like, where is this going for you?
Well, when we think of growth, it's not just obviously revenue growth, and asset growth is a part of that. But when you see growth as transformation, and you see growth as more career paths, and you see growth as opportunity, you want to grow as much as possible. But we do have like a very defined growth philosophy, in the same way that a vehicle has a governor, and that governor limits its max speed that the car can reach. We feel like we have a growth governor, and that governor is for clients. How do we make sure, the way I'll explain this is, how do we make sure, whether we have 100 clients, 1,000 clients, 100,000 clients, how do we make every single client feel like they're one of maybe a couple dozen people that Root works with, because of how responsive we are, how proactive we are, how in tune we are to their needs, even maybe when they're not as in tune with those needs themselves. So how do we maintain that as one side of our governor? And then on the other side, it's for the team. How do we make this the place that every single team member wakes up on the balls of their feet? If you imagine an athlete just cannot wait to get out on the field, cannot wait for the game to start, the excitement of that, the adrenaline that comes from that sometimes. How do you make this the place where people wake up on the balls of their feet, excited to get to do the work that I think all of us who listen to your podcast would agree is the best work in the world, the best job in the world, to be in this industry? So how do you instill both of those things? And we're obviously not perfect with that. As we've grown fast, but it's not nearly as fast as we could have grown if we didn't have that governor, if we didn't have either of those growth standards. So in many ways, those growth standards have limited how fast we have grown. So we have those things in place to say, yeah, we want to grow as much as possible, but those are our non-negotiables. If either of those things start to falter, and as with anything, there's Andy Grove had a saying that you let chaos reign and you reign in the chaos. Meaning sometimes you just have to pressure the system and see what's working and what's not. A mediocre system, a bad system, it can withstand a very low growth rate. It cannot withstand a high growth rate. And so pressure the system, see what's not working, whether that's culture is breaking or services are breaking or whatever's breaking. And breaking is the wrong word, but how do you start to see where those fissures are happening, those cracks are happening, and try to be 2 steps, 3 steps ahead of addressing them before they become full-fledged problems? As long as we can do that, we want to grow as much as we possibly can. Going back to growth means more impact for more clients. It means career paths for people here. It means so much more than just the asset growth or the revenue growth. There's a lot of good stuff that comes from that, as long as you're not sacrificing those 2 non-negotiables along the way.
So in practice, how do you actually measure or evaluate these governors to figure out, are we really serving clients well? Is our team really happy?
Yeah. Obviously, there's not a single advisor in the world that wouldn't say service is what differentiates them from every other advisor who also says that service is what differentiates them. So we have some standards. So we regularly send out NPS surveys or client satisfaction surveys to clients.
Okay.
And we get very, very strong scores. Some of this is just anecdotal. We get so many emails from clients saying, hey, just they're so beyond happy to be. Then they just want to highlight, hey, I worked with JT, I worked with Katie, I've been working with Harry, and they just want to say, I wanted to tell you how awesome of a job they're doing because this has been such a delightful experience for myself, for my wife, for whoever it is. So part of it is very standardized. We have data around it. Part of it is just trying to keep a pulse on what are people saying. What are the emails we're receiving? What's the good feedback, the negative feedback? And thankfully, the good significantly outweighs anything negative, but it's data driven in that sense. I think on the team side, that's the one that's hard. Like, how do you sure you can do like an MPS, you can do some other stuff, but I think that like we always hire for a lot of roles. I started doing jiu-jitsu a couple of years ago, and someone recommended a book to me. I thought that was kind of odd to read a book about. It seemed like a very experiential thing. Like you just go do it and learn it. It's not something you read
Right.
about. And so, and maybe this is not the right analogy, but it stuck with me. And the book opened with, "What's the best time to kill a dragon?" And it's like, what do you? And it's like, it's not when this dragon is breathing fire and wreaking havoc on all the poor townspeople like you see in the movies. It's when it's still an egg. And the analogy is essentially, look, what's the best way to get out of a rear naked chokehold? Well, don't let yourself get in a rear naked chokehold to start with. So like how can you anticipate what's to come? How can you anticipate the future dragons? And how can you try to it's a dramatic analogy, but like kill that egg before it becomes this full-fledged fire-breathing dragon wreaking havoc on your business? So how do you anticipate problems with lead generation, with cash flow, with culture? Culture is a huge one. Like, what do you stand for? Why would people want to join you? You talk about this talent shortage. I don't think there's much. Sure, there is some, but I think most times, like, why would younger advisors want to join some of these firms? How do you become that firm that people want to join? So that's just a philosophy that we've looked at. And so going back to like, how do we maintain that sense of let's make sure people wake up on the balls of their feet? I don't have a great answer for how do we measure that in a very data-driven way, as much as like that is probably the thing I obsess about and focus on more than anything else, because to create the best client outcomes, we need to create a place that attracts the best advisors, best team members in the industry, and gives them the tools to continue to develop and learn and be the best advisor they can be and never want to leave Root, ideally. So I don't have a data answer for that as much as I think it just comes down to an obsession about how do you monitor that the right way.
So as we come to the end here, this is a podcast about success, and just one of the themes that comes up is that word success means very different things to different people, right? Sometimes it changes for us as we go through growth and stage of the business. And so you have this just incredibly successful business as you're crossing $1 billion with an extraordinary growth rate, and solving for the systems problems that it takes to keep growing. And so the business seems to be in a wonderfully successful place. How do you define success for yourself at this point?
Just a general sense of doing things on purpose, which is, I think, starts being purposeful about taking the time to understand what's important to you. I think to be the best advisor, you're really leading clients in major life decisions. How do you do the same? How do you spend time alone, journaling, deep in thought about what do I value, what's important to me? Being purposeful about doing the things that align with that in a consistent way. So obviously, different times of life, different things are going to be important, but I guess the ability to disconnect from the present state and just think deeply about where am I, where do I want to be, and how do I want to spend my time, my money, my energy along the way getting there. So just living on purpose.
And how do you define that for yourself right now? Like how do you define where you want your time and energy to be going?
Yeah, I think right now just practical. So I've got a 3-year-old daughter and a 10-month-old son. And so it's presence is a big thing. So am I home by 5:15 every day and not looking at my phone until kids are asleep and I've had a chance to connect with my wife after the fact? Am I there every morning from 7 when they wake up until about 8:15 they head for work in present? So presence is a big part of that today. Obviously, the business is doing a lot of great things, but the family piece too, of making sure that the things that we're doing to grow the business are not in any way infringing upon what I care way more about, which is that being a present father, being a present husband, and between family and business right now, those are the two things where I'm trying to be successful, probably than anything else.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, James, for joining us on the Financial Advisor Success Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
Thank you.
Want even more ideas, tools, and resources on how to break through to the next level of success as a financial advisor? Check out the leading financial planning industry blog, Nerd's Eye View, at www.kitsis.com, where Michael covers the latest practice management trends and financial planning strategies. And by joining the members section, you can earn IMCA and CFP continuing education credits, along with exclusive member content. Get it all now at www.kitsis.com.